Hey runners of the wild, so the following videos are little tips and tricks to help bulletproof your ankles. I hope you guys enjoy. These are controlled articular rotations, fancy way for saying joint circle. You've probably heard of drawing your ABCs after an acute ankle sprain. All we're trying to do is be a little more specific and more or less scrape the entire aspect of your ankle mortise joint. So the way that we do that is we're gonna trap your thigh into your body here. And if we look at this kind of big knob of a bone, this tibial tuberosity, we don't want to see any movement occur there. So we're going to try to lock that. If you have to hold that, you can hold it. And now what we're trying to do is draw the biggest, most controlled circle we can without getting any tibial rotation. So we're trying to create, again, a big circumferential joint movement without my tibia taking over. So a poor rep may look like this. If I let that whole leg go for a ride, now I'm having a hard time differentiating what's tibial, femoral rotation, and what's ankle mortise rotation. So one more time, keep that still. Even if you gotta hold it, we can get in here and do almost like a Kimura, like we're doing jiu-jitsu. Biggest circle, a lot of times you'll cramp because you're gonna fight to get to those end ranges. But I think of a mortar and pestle. That's why this is called a mortise joint, because we're scraping all the edges of that joint. These are ankle isometrics. So an isometric contraction is where the muscle stays the same length for the entire time. So what we're gonna do here is, if you imagine that I'm standing on flat ground, I'm gonna lock my ankle into 90 degrees. We could use a stretch strap, a towel, a belt, a small animal of some sorts if you're out on the trail. And what we want to do is lock that ankle into a position and now try to move that ankle out of that position. Now you got to get enough of a kind of noose on that foot to where I can't move it if I'm trying to point, flex, side to side. This is where sometimes a good tag team partner can come in here and just limit that range of motion. But using a towel, and we'll do about 30 to 45 seconds is that kind of magic window of isometric loading. May do 3 rounds at a time. So these are single leg deadlifts. It's very important early in ankle rehab to start getting your hip and your ankle to talk, right? Your hip is going to allow your ankle to do what it needs to do. So one of those drills, single leg deadlift. In the beginning, sometimes balance is an issue after an ankle sprain, and we kind of get that blind ankle syndrome where we lose a lot of that proprioceptive feedback. So we don't want to learn to do a movement based on poor balance. So the last thing I want to see is I go into a movement like this and I'm kind of shaky. So I'd rather give some support. So a foam roller, a good friend, a stick, whatever you got. And all we want to do is hinge at the hip, slight bend at the knee. We're probably going to hit about a 45 to 50 degree angle, basically wherever that would put your hands at mid tibia or mid shin. So again, using that foam roller, I can do it 2 different ways. Just simply use it on the ground, or I can put that between my foot and my hand, and now I have a dynamic balance component here where I can press between the two, and this creates a lot of stability. Now a couple notes here. My toes are gonna stay firmly planted on the ground. So if I go bad rep, you're gonna see those toes spring up in the air. Nobody in the history of the world has ever taken off to jump off one foot and their toes be up in the air. Second thing, if I'm coming down the line here, this is a very common mistake. If I turn, we'll see people can opener. They'll rest on that kind of hip right there. What we want to do is have the hips parallel to the ground. Some scale up for this is if I put a little resistance band around my foot, cross that over to my opposite side hand, and now as I go, this gives me some stability, but also some resistance. So again, I go down and I come up, and this is creating resistance, but at the same time stability. And then our highest level where we can actually turn this into a true exercise and part of our cross training, same drill, we tend to go cross body again for a little bit of stability. And we don't have to go all the way to the ground. We'll see a lot of people sacrifice lumbar flexion to go to the ground. Like I said, this is about getting your ankle to be stable while we move around a dynamic tip, or I tend to call them supination curtsies. So this is a good way to start moving in a different plane of motion around the hip and ankle. So this move basically looks like this, and you can see why it's called a bowler squat. Let's say balance is an issue. We're in that ankle early phase rehab. I can use a slide plate, a paper plate, I can use a towel on hardwood or tile. but now I can create another point of contact and slide that back foot behind. Some key points here. If I'm facing the camera here, you're gonna see that this knee tracks out over that second to third toe. So that kneecap's gonna point out over those toes, which technically is in line with the ankle mortise joint. That would be a faulty rep right there where that knee starts to cave in, what's called valgus, right? And that's kind of a precarious position of the knee. So again, bowler squat, knees tracking out to that second or third toe, toes are firmly planted. If I want to spice it up a little bit, get rid of the slide plate, gently tap. And you should feel a little bit of stretch through that lateral glute complex. And then we can always add a little bit of weight or resistance. Just like that, no need to get the weight all the way to the ground. Obviously, one of the most typical complaints after an ankle sprain is ankle stiffness. So as we get out of that acute phase, we have to get that ankle moving more. If you're seeing a physical therapist, chiropractor, they have all sorts of tools and tricks to help get that ankle moving. If you're on your own, one of the best drills that I've found is what I call a triplantar ankle mobilization. So your ankle has kind of 3 knuckles. It's not that it just moves forward. It has a bit of rotation that allows it to move in technically multiple planes, but we're just gonna pick 3 of the strongest planes. So find yourself a wall, a tree, a trail buddy. We're gonna plant the foot firmly. So now we don't wanna see that foot rocking, or we don't wanna see the heel lift. Plant, we're gonna go forward as far as we can. So this is called ankle dorsiflexion. We're gonna bounce back. We're gonna go forward and in, and then forward and out. I get a little rhythm to it. So pick your favorite song, right? If you're Michael Scott and you're learning how to do CPR, it's gonna be the Bee Gees, Staying Alive, right? 100 beats per minute. Otherwise, we're just getting this little rhythm and mobilizing. This is a great drill to hit before a run. Now, if that's not quite enough and we're really restricted in that ankle, we can start mimicking what's called a mulligan mobilization, where we apply pressure against the joint. So here I have a resistance band of about 30 pounds. I'm gonna put some decent pressure on it. I'm gonna use the same mobilization technique. So forward, forward out, forward in, and we gotta keep that ankle moving. Post ankle sprain, our ankle and our foot tends to get a little lost in space. So we have to reintegrate those joints and tissues and the small nerves in the end of our feet, which there's around 8,000 nerve endings in each foot. So we gotta wake those puppies up. So there's a couple drills I'm gonna show you, a couple things you might already be doing, but we may throw some little tweaks at you that can make it just that much better. So first things first, this is something I challenge everybody to try. So we're gonna call this toe yoga. So even if you haven't sprained your ankle, try this. Can you independently lift that big toe without these other 4 toes showing up? Look, I got these nasty trail toes, guys. And then I gotta be able to do the reverse. And then I gotta be able to dance back and forth. So we wanna have independent control of those toes and maybe even be able to do a little cascade or waterfall action through there. So that's toe yoga. Second thing, we're outside on the trail anyways. We don't have to have these fancy balls here with the spikes on it. We could walk on some grass, we could walk on some uneven surfaces, help get that proprioceptive input from all those free nerve endings we were just talking about. But if you got a dog toy laying around, these fancy spiked balls, this is where you gently roll your feet. So we are not trying to dig in with this spiky ball. What we're trying to do is if there's any semblance of ticklishness or this just feels really sensitive, we're trying to get rid of that. You can do the same exact thing with a hairbrush. Last thing that I think all of us as runners should be doing is trying to stand on our lacrosse ball, not just gently roll. Our feet need to be tough and robust. We're gonna go out there, and even though we might have rock plates in our shoes and really, those fancy padded trail shoes, our feet are still gonna take a beating. So let's get them a little more robust. I say try to stand on that ball for 2 minutes each day. Explore different parts of your feet. If you find a spot that's really tender, back off, roll that spot. I promise you one thing, give yourself 2-3 weeks, you're gonna be able to stand on this thing like a champ. These next drills are definitely not something to do right after your ankle sprain. These are what we're gonna try to do to not ever have that ankle sprain again, but here's my caveat on that. We're running on trails, uneven surfaces, blasting down single track, we're gonna roll an ankle. So the goal here is to limit injury, but also when we do have that ankle roll, reduce the grade of sprain, so maybe take it from a grade 3 to a grade 1, or at least reduce the amount of pain. So we're trying to build tolerance through these tissues and joints. So a great way to do that is, first of all, make sure that I can get my foot into the position that I would roll it in. I know this may seem a little confounding, right? It's a conflicting idea to put my foot or joint into a position that it would get hurt in, but if you're not comfortable in that position and I get thrown there by the trail, not under my own volition, I'm probably gonna run into a problem. So good thing is, can I get each ankle in what would be called supination inversion? You've all heard of an inversion sprain. If I can do that, okay, let's see if we can get both at the same time, and these are called butterfly squats. So now we just start to load this position. And it's not that we've got to add a bunch of weight, do a bunch of reps, but I should be able to get into these positions and be. So that was our videos for bulletproof ankles. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope you can use something tomorrow out on the trail to help get your ankles better. If you have questions, get a hold of me, drbeaubeard@gmail.com or @drbeaubeard on all social media.